awesome. So Southern California. So good thing I said afternoon. So good afternoon to you. I'm in DC, so it is the evening for me over here. So if anyone else is joining on the East Coast. And no matter what time it is, thank you in advance for your time. No matter, like I said, no matter what time it is, you're devoting time for this. So thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to get us started. So, like I said, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. This is our second Every Educator Counts webinar for this school year. To those of you that joined us last month, thanks for coming back. And if it's your first session with us, thanks for coming. You can always catch the replay of our last webinar or any other webinars that we've had past years in the webinar archives on our website, and I'll be sure to share that link a little bit later, and you'll get it in the follow-up email as well. So for anyone new, really quickly, Reading is Fundamental. That's who we are. We are the nation's largest children's literacy nonprofit, and these webinars are a part of our commitment to supporting educators with tools and strategies to bring literacy to life every day in their classroom. Tonight, specifically, we're diving into the science of writing in action. We'll explore how to build student writing skills through lessons that blend modeling, practice, and collaboration. So you'll get to see how strong mentor text, scaffolded writing, and teamwork can spark inspiration and help students grow into confident, independent writers. So we're especially excited to welcome back a dear great friend of Riff, best-selling author and literacy consultant Lori Oczkus. Many of you might remember her from last year's session that she facilitated on reading comprehension. Tonight she's back and she's going to share fresh and powerful insights and practical strategies that you can use right away, just like tomorrow, to strengthen writing instruction across all different types of writing genres. So with that, I'm super excited, and let's give a warm welcome to Lori. So Lori, thanks so much for coming back, and we will love to have you again and again.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Kylie. It's great to be here. I love to ask students, what is reading? And I often ask them, what is writing as well? And when I ask them, what is writing? These are the kinds of things they say. It's boring if you're forced to do it. It's fun if you can write anything you want. So try asking your students, what is writing? And do you like to do it? Here's another student, and this is such a funny little sample that I've had for a long time, but I just love it. I think it says it all. This fifth grader said, writing is the thing teachers and parents use to torture kids and stress them out. Once in a while, teachers make you write a district writing prompt. That really stresses me out. So, how do we get kids to joyfully write, and how do we solve some of the problems that our students have with writing? So let's take a look at what problems your students have with writing. So I'd like for you just to pop in the chat some of the problems that your kids have. By the way, it's great to have people here from California, Florida, New York. We have people from all over the US, and we will have many, many people watch this afterwards. So you can watch this afterwards. You can show it to your staff afterwards, use it in your PD. What's great about Reading is Fundamental is it's wonderful. It's a nonprofit, and you can access all of the free resources for your students, which is really great, and for your own PD. I'm very excited to once again present for this organization. And I am Lori Oczkus. I'm a literacy consultant. I travel around the country and the world, actually, presenting through the International Literacy Association and ASCD. I also have some NCTE materials I'll talk about today. So four nonprofits that I'm associated with, including the one you're watching today. I work in school districts with side by side with teachers where I am invited into classrooms. Currently, I'm working in Prince George's County with middle school special ed, which is pretty cool. I also work in many bilingual and multilingual settings. I am in Spanish, so I end up working in schools like that. And we help improve literacy all around using the science of reading, but also my focus is comprehension and my special niche topic tonight, which is guided writing. It's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite junior high resource. Okay, yay, we've got you here. So regardless of whether you teach K or even high school, you're gonna walk away with some really great ideas that I can't wait to share with you that work to boost not only writing, but the joy of writing. So pop into the chat, if you will, some problems your students have with writing. And I'm going to go ahead and outline some of the ones that I see that our students often really, they just sit there looking at a blank paper, panicking. What do I do? Sometimes we do that as well. Getting that first sentence out is always the hardest, isn't it? When you have to write a report or write something, just start writing. Our kids write dull, lifeless pieces often without detail. They can't tell main idea from detail, that getting started, their voice is missing, the organization of the pieces is very difficult for them. And many of us are not always happy with the writing programs that we have in our school districts. What's great about what I'm going to show you right now is that this is a scaffolding piece. It's not something you buy. In fact, I will share a couple resources I've written about it. But once I show you how to do it, you should be able to run and do it with your materials. It's a missing middle piece. I call it the MMP. So if you will share throughout some of the problems your students are having with writing, then I can address those as we go. Our objectives today are to boost success and motivation and engagement. We are going to talk about the three genres that many of you teach, and that would be personal narrative, expository, and persuasive writing. At pretty much at all grade levels, we teach those. So the lessons I'm going to show you will apply to all of those. Getting started and keeping kids on assignment is an additional problem someone has mentioned. I think in writing intimidates a lot of people. I have had teachers come up to me privately and tell me that they are intimidated by writing as well. So writing is kind of mysterious in a way, but I'm going to show you today how you can make it not so mysterious for your kids and also for you in teaching it. The two resources that I myself have published are, the first one is Guided Writing with Heinemann Publishers. This is a slim little book that will show you how to do it. I also have an even slimmer piece of PD that I did for NCTE, the National Council Teachers of English. And it's one of those trifolds. It was kind of fun to write because I packed a whole bunch of information into just one little piece. So I have that. And good news, Carly, we have a handout, right? We have a handout and
We
everybody's.
do. I will drop that link in the chat in a moment. I'm here working in the back.
And if for some reason you're viewing this and you can't find the handout, you can always email me, myself, or the organization for it, and we will get it to you. Because I have a handout that I've really loaded with everything I'm talking about today that you could walk off and get started with right away with guided writing. Again, we have a variety of grade levels, and we have a variety of teachers here. Some of you are administrators, staff development, professors, classroom teachers. Wherever you are, whatever you teach, this is for you. So how will guided writing and gradual release boost student writing in my classroom? Now, I'm just going to give you some clues. Why is this a guided writing lesson? The students are reading an article about the Titanic. This particular table is reading one heading only. They're reading it and then they're going to summarize it and write a paragraph together. Each student is responsible for writing just one sentence. Do you see they have sentence strips? What are they going to do with those? They're going to order them in an order that makes sense. And what are they going to do with the green? They're going to write an introductory sentence to their paragraph as a team. So each student is responsible for writing a piece of it, and you'll see how it all goes in a minute. But that's kind of in a nutshell what I do over and over again in classrooms. We read something and then we write in response to it. And often we write either one sentence or a very short, what I call piece. And I like to use the term piece. I've always considered myself a writer, even as a child. I have the little notebook with hearts on it that I wrote poems about all kinds of rock bands and different things in throughout the years. I loved writing. And I've always considered myself a writer. And I really like the word piece. We're going to write a piece. What is a piece? A piece is something that it's kind of messy, it's fast, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. So I love using that writer's language with students, and they like it too. Let's see what a difference guided writing is going to make. Now, where does it fit in? So guided writing is a step a scaffolding between shared writing and independent writing. So, have you ever stood in front of the class, done a very good job modeling? You showed models from literature, you wrote something yourself, you might have even showed the students some samples, and then it's time for them to write their own. And what do? They look at you and go, "What do we do?" And you have 7 people sharpening pencils or stalling. This is behavior we see all the time. Why? Because they need another step. They need guided writing. They need the missing middle piece. They need a little teamwork to work together before we release them to sit and write their own. So it is a missing piece, I call it. In gradual release of responsibility, which of course is the research of Pearson and Gallagher in the area of literacy, really anything we teach, we model first. You're teaching a kid to drive, you're not just going to let them drive on their own. There are many steps in between before you do anything. Riding a bike, learning to read, learning to write is the same way. So the I do step, the we do, which you've heard of before, and the you do are all really important parts of gradual release of responsibility. The teacher is going to show examples in the identify step. We're going to look at literature, we're going to look at other student samples, and we're going to say, hey, this is pretty cool. We might even use highlighters and highlight those part elements of the text that are really great. Then we're going to do some teacher modeling and actually write in front of the students. Sometimes what I will do is write it ahead of time and just copy it. They don't have to know that you're actually copying something, and maybe you use it every year in this lesson. You're going to demonstrate actually the process of writing and getting started. Then perhaps shared writing is a step. I made it small because not all of you are going to use it. We use it a lot with little kids. It's a wonderful step where the class helps you write. You're writing, but they're kind of contributing, and you're more of a scribe. But the guided writing step, look how big I made it. It's a big we do. It's a big together. It's an additional step. Do you have to use it every time you're teaching writing? Mm-mm. Use it when you feel like it. Use it when everybody's just falling flat and things are kind of going, "Ugh." Use it when you want. I want you to have the tools to do that. So it's a big we do together. The students are going to do the writing with teacher guidance on using all kinds of what I call cool tools, which are sticky notes, graphic organizers, sentence strips, all kinds of tools, different kinds of pencils, markers, so that we're varying what they do. And they only have to write a little bit that they then combine with a team to make a bigger piece of writing. And then we have practiced writing. And then when it's time for them to write their own, it's going to be wonderful because they've had this chance to practice and in a messy way with a team and figure out what the problem areas are and how to do it. So let's take a look at some cool tools, because this is a really big piece of the guided writing that I like to teach. And that is we use, again, sticky notes, different colored sentence strips. Now, I went into one of my schools in Ohio. The principal, I had asked for sentence strips. And usually what people do is they'll take construction paper and cut it for me ahead of time, or I stand there and cut it. And I go into classrooms with those. But they gave me the most wonderful, very large tag board kind of sentence strips that were this big for every student when I went into the classroom. Kids were gasping. We get to write on those. They loved it. So I gave them to the kids. And then when they wrote their together pieces, they popped them on the ground onto large poster boards. So it was really a fun lesson, a fun way to teach at every grade level. So vary the size of the papers. Sometimes use really tiny papers or sticky notes and do that. So all of these drama gestures, you're going to see examples of all of these tied to student text. And I'm going to show you what they look like. I want to show you just some more samples of kind of what it looks like. This is from 3rd grade. And can you guess what we were writing about? Wonder Woman? Well, we had the kids, each student had to choose which was their favorite superhero. We'd read some graphic novels and some comics. The students had to choose which was their favorite and why. And we'd actually made some charts with some vocabulary describing each of them. So they had those up on the board. Students wrote independently on their strips, and I made different colored ones for the different. If you want Wonder Woman, you get orange. If you want Superman, you get blue. So we passed out different colors. Students wrote one sentence using the chart and also their own ideas. Then we pulled teams. I said, whoever has Wonder Woman, come over here, Superman over there, Spider-Man over there. Kids sat down on the floor and formed paragraphs and then came up with their beginning and ending of the paragraph as a team. So that was a quick guided writing lesson that really made them feel like fluent writers and like they wrote a lot, because we looked at the whole class. I said, we have 33 kids in here. We have 33 sentences all put together. Here's another one with little children. The Chicken and the Worm is a fabulous book that it's a seesaw book. The chicken does this, the worm does that. On every page, they go back and forth, how they eat, where they sleep, what they do. I had children choose after we read the book, and again, made a chart with some vocabulary for chickens and worms, and gave each student their individual strip and said, hey, write a sentence about, you can choose chickens or you can choose worms. So the idea of choice in this is really fun. So they wrote their sentences. Some of them didn't quite write a sentence. So we have different shapes and colors. Okay. But they realize when they're working with the other students that they don't have a sentence. You can give kids starters for their sentences, which I'll talk about in a moment. And you can already see a problem here. Everybody's sentence starts with they. So guess what the follow-up lesson is? How to vary the beginning of sentences. So it really leads to a lot of fabulous teaching that becomes on the spot and really wonderful. And this happens at all grade levels, where they often choose the same beginning of the sentence. And they're like, well, this is kind of boring. This paragraph doesn't work. So that's what we did in that classroom. And there we go. There's the worm group. They got on the floor and look, they came up with their paragraph about worms. Here's one where we had everyone sitting at the table in first grade take a sentence strip and write about a piece of fruit that was in front of them. They had one child was in charge of writing about how it tastes, somebody else how it feels when you touch it, somebody else what it looks like. And look at this beautiful little poem they wrote. Blueberries. The small blueberry is as blue as a blue gem. This puny round blueberry feels bumpy, like a tire on the top and smooth like my desk on the bottom. My blueberry tastes as sweet as a luscious lollipop. And that was a combined effort. Again, each student wrote one, and then we typed them up and made a little class book out of them for them to read. But again, it's that one, I call them one sentence wonders that we do. So we're going to talk about 5 different types of lessons today that fit into this I do, we do, a big we do, and then students write independently. And again, I'm going to show you lots of examples for each so that you can kind of see, this is how I might use it in my classroom. And again, you're not going to use it for every single writing assignment. You're going to use it when you feel like, this would really warrant what I saw in that workshop about guided writing and the missing middle piece. So we're starting with strip summary poem. And if you're taking notes, go ahead and just write. You're going to have this in the handout, but go ahead and write number 1, a strip summary or poem. And I'm going to show you, this is the one I use the most of all of the lessons you see here. I use it over and over and over because I tie it to writing all the time. I mean, to reading, the reading assignments that we have. So let's start with our strip summary and poem and see what that looks like. And in your handout, you have these directions. So the students for informational text are going to read an informational text and then choose one favorite fact that they want to write about on their strip. They write that, or it could be on a sticky note. I often just do it on sticky notes. So then the students each sit in a circle and read theirs, and then they decide and negotiate. This is a great editing tool, which person's sentence should go first and which second and which third. And then again, we give them one strip to write at the beginning and the end so they can make it into more of a full paragraph. So let's see what that looks like. Here we read a piece about Benjamin Franklin, and this is out of a series I wrote with Dr. Tim Rosinski on, it's called Close Reading with Paired Text. So we had read a poem about Ben Franklin, and then we read this informational article, and we used reciprocal teaching, which is another one of my favorite strategies, to read the text and comprehend it. Then afterwards, I asked students again to choose what their favorite fact they learned. And he's so interesting. Look at all the cool things. You could have simple things like when he was born, but he decided to stop going to school. He was 13 when he helped his brother's printing. He owned his own painting house. Ben Franklin owned his own publishing house. He helped the United States of America uh, become a country. So he is one of the greatest Americans. So the kids wrote some really cool sentences. Again, shared them in their circle. And I had them stand up and share them, just stand up there. And in the middle of the desk, they had this white paper and they just popped it on. Now, because every sentence starts with he, then we went back and said, well, could we take a couple of you who will volunteer to change the beginning of your sentence just so that it would read a little more smoothly? So we can actually work that kind of writing into it. But what's great is we know from the research that definitely when students are introduced to writing in conjunction with reading, their comprehension improves. So at any grade level, you can do these summary strips. So this is a summary strip. It could be a paragraph or a poem if you decided to make it as such. But see, they're standing up, writing them, and negotiating meaning, which I love because they're really talking about the text and talking about their writing as well. Now, some of the teachers that I work with will take it one step further, and they will have the students do even more the next day with the writing, or you can consider it a simple piece just for today and move on. You don't have to do that necessarily. So there they are, all for you to see. Now, I want to talk about the sentence level idea because it's very popular right now. We know that if you can't write a sentence, you really can't write anything. A sentence is a mini composition, it's been said. And it really is a well-crafted sentence. So many times when I'm reading novels, I'll want to underline, and I don't like writing in my books, but I'll think that is a great sentence. So really we want to be very good at writing sentences. Now, the work of the writing revolution from Natalie Wexler and Judith Hochman is fabulous. If you haven't read that book, it's wonderful. And also Patterns of Power by Jeff Anderson and Whitney Rococa. So look at what we could do with a sentence. We could take Martin Luther King wanted to turn the world upside down because, and we could have kids take different strips and write this on it. And somebody has at the table has because, somebody else in the group has but, somebody else has so, and they have to finish these sentences. So right now in the chat, if you would finish, you don't have to write the whole sentence, just write because or but or so, and see if you can finish this sentence. And that's a great way to do it. I love doing sentences this way. It's a starter, but it's a starter plus critical thinking, which is really great. So this is a lesson that you can easily adapt to any grade level. And we know from the research that summarization and sentence combining impact learning. So you're cementing what they've read, making them think critically, and then also expanding their writing. So this sentence level idea with guided writing is really, again, this is one of my favorites, and it's why I wanted to start with it with you so that you would have this one under your belt. The others I'm going to show you are also my favorites, but I've kind of boiled them down to a nutshell for our purposes today so you can use them right away. Now let's just take a peek at what people are saying about writing right now. There's a reading rope where all the components of reading are kind of woven together, that metaphor, and that they all work together to help students read. Well, the writing rope has been put together by Joan Sedita, and she is a professor who has come up with some great ways of talking about it. And so I've tied it to sixth straight writing, which is something I've used for many years, and I still really like it. How something comes along and then we don't talk about that anymore, we use something new. Well, they're really both great ideas and they're easy to tie together. The research on the writing rope as well as sixth straight writing. So here we go. Ideas would be sixth straight writing. First, you have ideas, and a lot of times kids will say to me, I have ideas, but I don't know what to do with them. Or sometimes they don't have any ideas. We have to help them find ideas by rereading or talking or whatever we need to do or modeling. So critical thinking goes hand in hand with ideas from our research and the writing rope. Text structure from the writing rope, we know that when we teach kids to read for text structure. So if you're reading a compare contrast text, can you write a compare contrast text? Can you write a main idea detailed text? You just read one. So analyzing that text structure will help kids with organizing their own writing. And we're going to look at a fabulous chart. So I'm going to show this to you in a bit, and it's in the handout that Professor Katie Wood Ray came up with, and it's a great chart for analyzing text structure and also craft. Syntax goes with sentence fluency. And when I have kids read their sentences, you want some long sentences, some short sentences. You want your sentences to flow, to make sense, the grammar to make sense inside that sentence. And then, of course, craft, looking at word choice. It's often been said that writing that doesn't have good word choice doesn't have voice to it. It doesn't have any pep. It doesn't have any interest. So we want kids to really look at what the authors are doing in their craft and kind of copy it, if you will, at times. And that's what we're going to look at in the rest of this workshop is how can we get kids during that analyze step to really copy what the author has done and try to emulate that sort of writing and adopt some of that. And then, of course, transcriptions would be conventions, which are also important in our writing, of course. So what's going on now with writing really does tie into what we're doing. And I always like to take a couple of good samples and pop them up for you and show them to you and say, what's good about this writing? Does it have the elements of good writing? This is a poem that Hank wrote. Crackle, crackle hums the flare, blazing colors of orange and red, with smoke blowing and clouding in the wind, cozy and peaceful like serenity. Excitement flows and fills my body with warmth. Only wishing it would stay, blowing wisps and burning with embers, fading and smoke flying. Crackle, crackle hums the flare. That's a fifth grader writing a poem. Isn't that great? So when I have kids write poetry, by the way, do you notice how at the top he's got his brainstorm? And I still really believe in writing. I still like writing bubbles for my brainstorming. I know it doesn't work for everyone. Some people like a list. So I tell the kids, if you don't like a bubble, make a list. But I have them fold their paper like this. And at the top, see their bubbles up here. And of course, I'm modeling the same thing, just a little bit so that it's right there. It's not on a separate piece of paper. When you start to write, you can look at your bank, whether it's vocabulary or in this case, all the different aspects of fire that Hank wanted to write about. It does have all of the elements of really excellent writing, this poem. And then here's a child, Christian, who read this in a suit and tie, a first grader in a suit and tie, in front of the parents. We had a parent workshop on writing, and check this out. He stood up and went like this and read his paper. I was sad when my dog died when I was 5 years old. It just started when I was riding my bike. Just then I saw my dog and I thought he was sleeping and I tried to wake him up. First, I tried to yell and he didn't wake up. And second, I tried to stomp my feet, but he didn't wake up. Then my grandpa came and said, he's dead. And that is the very last time we saw him. you know, does this have elements of all of the pieces of good writing and that writing rope? It's wonderful. And did you know that in this school, we did guided writing all year long? And this was in the spring in first grade. What's great about this is we had looked at like Three Billy Goats Gruff and other stories where there are three events that happen, the different Billy Goats go across different attempts. And he used this technique in his writing. First, I tried to yell, and second, I tried to stomp. And then Grandpa came along. So he didn't just say, I found my dog and Grandpa told me he was dead. That was the last time we'd see him. He built it into a story based on the analysis we had done, really identifying these things in literature. And in this classroom, we had written, and in all the first grades I work with, we always talk about learning to do something. For some kids, it would be learning to ride a bike. And I give them a piece of paper and we fold it into boxes. You have to draw pictures of the first attempt, the second attempt, and the third attempt. And that's what we copy from the literature that we're reading. And the students then have, oh, story. It's how to make your story, the middle of your story, longer. And it's guided writing that we use to do that. So let's take a look at some other examples of, and I'm going to show you one of my favorite ways to teach this. And all of you can do this, whether you're kindergarten or 12th grade, great beginnings and endings. And if we look at literature and we analyze and we open books and we say, what are the different ways you can begin a story? You can begin with all these different ways. And I'm sure you've taught them, and I could just pop them up on the board for the kids and give examples of each. But what I like to do with the kids is what I call the bum lesson. Write that down, B-U-M. The reason why I call it the bum lesson is because when it's with first graders, they grab a library book or whatever book they're reading for enjoyment, a piece of literature, they bring it to the rug and they sit on it. They sit on your bum, sit on it. And when I ask them, I say, okay, take the book out and read the first sentence or the first page to your buddy. And then I call on people, what does your story start with? What does yours start with? What does yours start with? And then we start to figure out that there are noisy words, quotations, we paint a picture with a description, we have action, and we have thoughts or feelings. Any book that you pick up is going to have one of these. So everybody shares theirs and we chart them and we say, oh, look at all these different examples. I wonder if we could use them in our writing. Now with older kids, I do the same thing. I have the students sit at their desk. We can even pull out, if they're reading like a Hope Mifflin Reader, something like that, they can pull out the anthology and turn to any story, any nonfiction, and just tell me the beginning. When we chart them, the different types of beginnings that are in there, or they can take their novel and we share the different types of beginnings that there are. And it might even be a story in the reader that we haven't read yet. It was a dark and stormy night. What's that? Description. Paint a picture. And I have little gestures to go with these. I know it's kind of dorky. Some of you might say, I don't want to use the gestures, but guess what? It's brain compatible if you use gestures. So painting a picture is a good way to do it. So let's look at the other ways to do it. Let's see some other examples. Oh, showing that one. In the light of the moon, a little egg lay on a leaf. What's that? It's description and it's Eric Carle. Where's Papa going with that axe? Talking, and guess what it is? Charlotte's Web. So you can see that as I show each one, we're going to identify what kind it is. It was one of those super duper cold Saturdays. One of those days when you breathe out your breath and it kind of hung frozen in the air like smoke. The Watsons go to Birmingham. So on and on we go. Here we have tap, 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 tap down the line. What is that? Bud, not buddy. And that's a noisy word. It's onomatopoeia. So all of these are great ways to start. So all you have to do is pull out whatever books your kiddos are reading and chart what they can find it. Now, how do you transfer this to a writing lesson, especially personal narrative? You're going to say, all right, guys, now what we're going to do is you're going to watch me and I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me. And I pick something exciting. Now, this is kind of too exciting. I have things that are less exciting than this, like the time I ate a dog treat accidentally that was in my pocket. I thought it was an almond because I live on almonds, and I was walking my dog and I pulled it out and ate a dog treat. So sometimes I make that into a little vignette. It's a really cute little piece to write about, a personal narrative. This personal, I know Carly's going, that's pretty funny, Lori. Kids love that one because they go, did it taste good? And well, it's chalky. And so I talk about calling my daughter. I talk about, how it tastes, how it felt in my teeth. I couldn't get it out. It didn't have any water. So think of some little stories that have happened to you. And everyday stories are good, like my dog treat. This is a more exotic story, but it's super fun to write about. We were in Hawaii and we were getting certified in scuba diving. We had family that lived there and they watched our little kids while we did it. And I'd always wanted to do this. So we went scuba diving and we went into a cave and saw a shark. Now that would be a short story. How could I make it longer? How could I start the story? So I talk, and this shark is, one of those sharks they have in Maui that, suppose they don't hurt you. Still, it's really creepy to see them. Very scary. So how do I begin? Do I talk about getting up at 5 a.m. and having breakfast? The kids go, no, that's boring. Do I talk about walking over there? No, do I talk about, maybe I'll start on the edge of the boat. Like when I'm standing there about to jump in, I was the last person to jump in. Everyone jumped in, and then the teacher's going, come on, come on, come on. I'm like freaking out. Finally, I jump in. And so that's my beginning of my story, the action. Now, what I often will do is have the students stand up and act out my story. And when I'm with a room full of teachers, I do this too. I've had as many as 300 teachers stand up and act out each of the beginnings of my story. So what I'm going to do is write that story, the beginning of that story, 5 or 6 different ways, using all the different techniques that we've just studied in literature. So I'd say, I held my breath, closed my eyes, and jumped into the cold water with all my scuba gear on. I began the descent down, down, down into the underwater world. And I have the participants do the same thing in the workshop. The students, the kids do it in the classroom. And they laugh and they're silly. We think it's silly, but it's fun. I say, well, what if I could just do a dialogue one? So I have them stand up again and go like this. And we say, what a great day for scuba diving. The water is so clear, exclaimed our scuba instructor on our test dive. By the way, he was a ex-Chicago cop with a knife strapped to his leg. So I was always closer to him than my husband because he just seemed like the right guy to be near. And he knew what he was doing. We could say, I hope we don't run into any sharks in the cave today, I thought nervously, so I could open up with that. Or kersplash, I held my breath as I jumped off the side into the water. Or I could do a description of the blue water and the seagulls and the wind. So look, I just, and I'm like, do I have to finish this thing? No, I'm just showing them the ways I could start it. Then I put kids in teams and we practice. And we practice, but we have to have a story to tell. So I'll have somebody come up and say, what happened to you last night? And I can say, here's what happened to me. I went walking my dog with my daughter, and she saw a woodpecker. We heard it, and she saw it. So I have 2 kids come up and pretend they act out the little story first. It takes 2 minutes to act it out, but then I can put kids in teams and say, okay, the story that you just saw acted out, make up a beginning. And you can do either a noisy beginning, or what other kind of beginning could you do? These kids are first graders and they did, what is that? It sounds like it's coming from the sky. Tap, tap, tap. Mrs. O, our reading teacher, heard a sound. What was that sound? Oh my God. I did not say that. I know which child wrote that, Kaisine. I think it's coming from the wire. Or this one. This one sounds a little Dr. Seussy. What was that noise as I was walking? Rebecca, did you hear that noise I say? What's that you say? And that's kind of the way they did the story. So we always act out the story, and it comes out with these adorable little beginnings at all grade levels. Tap, tap, tap. She was scared as she crossed the street. Her heart was pounding and she raced up the corner. So these are all really great ones. Now I can tell a more sophisticated story, like the time we were in Disneyland and my kids were all taking turns running around by themselves. We were standing at the edge of the roller coaster Mulan Drive, and they were taking just, going one. If you go as a single, you can go faster. So we were watching them all do that. Well, the thing broke and they had to shuttle every kid down. And I was panicking and yelling, going, where are you? Where are you? And my daughter looked down. People next to her said, do you know that woman? She said, no, I don't. So we acted it out. We have a couple kids come up, act it out. And then I put them into teams and they have to take my little story that happened to me and write beginnings. So I can write all the beginnings, or I can have them write the beginnings. And this one said, I'm freaking out. That's what that says, by the way. So there's some independent practice that you can do with students. Check this out. So after we do this, I'd say, think of a story that happened to you and start it 4 different ways. Sometimes I have them write a little bit about or draw a picture of what happened in their story, and then they have to do 4 different beginnings of their vignette to write about it. Now, think about, we have students writing at all grade levels, and this is really a great way to do it. Here's where I had kids just write 2 beginnings. They didn't have to write 4 in 2nd grade. Same thing for practice. And here's a student writing about the time that his dog knocked over the fishbowl and the fish were flapping around on the ground and downstairs, and his mother was screaming and they, the dog was hiding. So it's a great story, but look at all the cool beginnings to his story. It's really good. This was actually Nicole that wrote this. We had this student that had this happen. He orchestrated acting it out, and then each student had to write different beginnings for it. So there you go. We can do the same thing with endings to a story. And in my book on guided writing, I outline, because kids will say he went home and went to bed, or it was just a dream, or that's what happened when I went to the zoo. These are not great endings. So we come up with a memory, a feeling, a hope, a wish, a decision, an action, full circle, lots of different ways to end pieces as well. And again, put kids in teams to write endings to things. They love doing it. Sometimes we do what I call makeovers. I put this on the board and say, so that was the end of our nice trip to the park. I say, could you add a memory to that in your team, a feeling, or maybe do 2 of these? And the kids love doing it. So the beginnings and the endings are wonderful for teaching kids to use guided writing. And then the strips that we did in the beginning that can either be a poem or a summary are my favorites. So great beginnings and endings, write that down. And you can watch this again if you want to see what I said about it, plus the handout. Now we're going to take a quick look at a couple other things that will help your narrative writing. A weekend web is where students write what they did over the weekend, and they just write it for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 6 minutes. It's short. I write one and they write one, and I try to include all of the various good elements of writing. I want to have a nice beginning. I want to have either description, dialogue, action, or feelings. And in the handout, I have those 4 elements that you want in your personal narrative to make a really strong personal narrative. And I wrote about having a balloon fight that we had when we were raising our kids. I just remember it was a whole neighborhood balloon fight. It was so much fun. People were running around, and I had just washed my windows. So guess what happened? They were not so great after that, but it was worth it. It was really, really fun. But you'll notice that I tried to model very quickly. Did I write the whole story? I just wrote for like a little bit and got it going. And again, I did my paper folding. So at the top, I could keep the things that I wanted to say right there. And then I put students in independently to write their own weekend webs. So this student wrote about all the things he did on the weekend, but he zeroed in on just one topic instead of writing about every topic. So having kids write about what they did for their weekend is great, and using cool tools. This is a weekend web that a first grader did, and check out what we sometimes use, papers like this. Now this child turned her strip the wrong way, but that's okay. She says, one Saturday, my mom vacuumed her car and she went up by the steering wheel and vacuumed her keys. That's a pretty funny story, actually. You could have fun with that one. Here's a student that really went crazy with writing about all the things that they did on their web. They put everything on the web, but choose one topic to write about. I said, you did a lot of things this weekend, but choose one. And she picked her baseball game. She did go to Costco. It says got underwear and smelled cake. Like, that's kind of funny. That happened at Costco. She didn't write about that. She chose one topic to write about and wrote in depth and did all the things that we've been teaching them. With little kids, we have them write all the things you did on your weekend at the top, or 3 things you did, and choose one of them and do a beginning, middle, and end picture, a drawing, and then write a beginning to it. So these are things we do all the time in the classroom, even to kindergarten. And this is in the handout that will help you with your narrative writing. I wanted to show you then what our chart for craft, and this is in the handout. I love this chart. Anything you want to teach, you can say, what is the author doing? Why are they doing this? What should we call it? And we name it as a class. So we give it its own cute name. Have we seen this in other books? How might we use this in our writing? So I have 3 quick examples to this. This is a book that is an oldie but goodie. It's called My Mama Had a Dancing Heart. And what the author does is she goes through the seasons and does the same thing. So she starts with her topic, my mama had a dancing heart, and she shared that heart with me. And by the way, the last page of the book has the same thing. So it's a sandwich. And then it talks about what they do in the spring with a grin and a giggle. She says, a hug and a whistle. We'd slap our knees, and Mama would say, bless the world. It feels like a tip tapping, song singing, finger snapping kind of day. So let's celebrate. When a warm spring rain would come ping, pinging on the window pane, we'd kick off our shoes and run out into the rain. We'd dance a frog hopping, leaf growing, flower opening, hello spring ballet. And so for every season, she does a dance, a food, an activity. So after we read it and enjoyed it, we want to enjoy it, we went back and filled in the chart as a class. And as a class, look at that third column. We named it. We called it a seasonal repeater because they're using the seasons. She's using the seasons as an author to take you through and have you see how she spent time with her mother. And then she made up her own little cool pairs of words. And it's a story sandwich because the beginning and the end are my mama had a dancing heart and she saved that heart. She shared that heart with me. Well, do we know other books that do this? And how could we use this technique in our writing? And that's really what was cool is that from there, we had kids. I modeled my grandmother through the seasons, and I didn't bore them and make them listen to all 4 seasons. I just did one. And then after I did the one season, I put kids in teams because remember, if I had put them on their own, they would have gone, what do we do? And we said, what's something that goes through the seasons? How about our school building? So I put the winter team over here and the fall and the summer. We had the 4 season teams. Tables had 1 season and they had to write together, write a little piece about what happens at our school. Now, I could have done sentence strips, but they had one child writing and everybody kind of helping. But so that was a little different, but they did it and they combined them. Then when I said, sit at your desk and write about your dog or a person and run through the seasons, the writing was fabulous. They understood what it was because I added that we do piece. And this little guy wrote about his hamster. My hamster has a funny face. And this is the guy that asked me all through elementary school. He'd come up and pull on my dress or my jacket and say, Mrs. Oczkus, can I write about my hamster? And no matter what we were doing, he wanted to write about his hamster. So this was a chance where it was actually what he had to write about. And he did a fabulous job. And he went through the seasons. So the idea of using the pattern writing and that chart, wonderful. And it comes from the work of Katie Wood Ray and her fabulous book, Wondrous Words, which I recommend, Wondrous Words, published by NCTE. I found a book about hands. It's beautiful. It's about grandfather using his hands to help his son tie his shoes, play baseball, do all kinds of things. But this story is fabulous because it talks about him working at the Wonder Bread factory. So in the 50s and 60s, he could not touch the bread in the factory where he worked. So the story goes along with all these beautiful things he did with his hands. And then you can feel the students gasping when they hear that he couldn't use his hands to touch the bread because of the racism at the time. It always makes me cry when I'm reading this book. So I wrote about my grandmother again. I wrote a piece about her hands. Then I had students write just 1 sentence strip about hands. And they love doing it. My grandmother's hand, and they went to town. And I also, by the way, throw in the song Grandma's Hands by Bill Withers and play that for them. So we really take the whole hand thing and blow it up and do it. There's also a new book by Ray Craft called The Book of Hands, which is really great, that has beautiful, beautiful pictures in it. Other books that work well with this, if you're not from the prairie, I said, you know, if you're not from the prairie, you don't know grass, you don't know wind, you don't know dryness. So it talks about all the wonderful things being from the prairie, what that's about. And after reading the book and analyzing it, I said, we could pick a person like Simon Cowell. And I wrote about him and I said, if you don't know Simon, you don't know meanness. And I wrote about all the things that, you know, how mean he can be as a judge. And then the students just, it unlocks the writing in them after you do a big redo like this. You could put kids in teams. Like one time we wrote about different teachers in the building, the kindergarten, one of the kindergarten teachers, the favorite janitor, the only custodian at our school, Mr. Steve. At the time, the kids wrote about him and how he wore Bermuda shorts and drove a golf cart and always wore a plaid shirt, and they wrote about pieces about him. So it could be about a person. They all write together, and then individually when they write, you get the beautiful writing like this. If you don't know basketball, you don't know pressure. If you don't know dance, you don't know nervousness. If you don't know the Philippines, you don't know hard living. He's from the Philippines. Look at this beautiful writing. If you don't know pain, you don't know what it's like to be a little sister. So on and on. And you can use that same chart for nonfiction. So you can take, for informational text, you can take a book like Would You Win, Rhino versus Hippo? What is the author doing? Why are they doing it? So you can analyze craft of any text and come up with ideas for their own writing. And it works really, really well. For persuasive writing and also for our report writing, we use strips. So check this out. I already told you about the superhero writing assignment. Check out what they're doing. Okay, you know how that goes. And they had to choose why their superhero was the best. You can also have kids write an opinion about a food or an animal. I talked about my dog, why Charlie is the best, one reason, and then Charlie is, and most of all, and every day she steals my heart. So I modeled that piece. Favorites can lead to opinion writing. So I like to start with favorites. And then there's Charlie. She just died about a month ago. She was 16. We had her a long time and she was great. And I always like writing about her. One of my favorites to do with little kids is we take two characters, George and Clifford, and we read their books and we write charts about them. And then I say, you've got to pick which is your favorite and write about it and write a strip why it's your favorite. If Clifford is your favorite, you're going over here. If George is your favorite, we're going over here. And then the students construct some paragraphs about each of those and share them. Now, here's what we do for persuasive writing. We break it up into pieces and kids are going to work in teams. They're going to use markers. They're going to use big charts. So again, the cool tools are helpful. When we write our reports, we read. And I showed you this one in the beginning where we're reading about the Titanic, and it's an article that's several pages long and it has several headings. So each table's in charge of reading a heading and then writing a paragraph to summarize that heading. Then what we did is we turned it into, notice they've highlighted their articles. And then as a class together, we did a shared writing. We wrote the beginning paragraph and the ending paragraph. And then check this out, what we did. We then took all of the paragraphs and we did this in one class period. This was in 6th grade. Check it out. But I've done this at all different grade levels. And check it out. Each team had a representative come up and share their report, the part of the report that they wrote. And I said, we just did a flash report, which is what they call it out of one of the writing projects. But I love that term, a quick report that we just did together. They feel like they are writing. And let's see, here we are, kids. Sometimes if you don't want to use strips and you want kids to write more paragraph-ish type or longer pieces, you can have them here. We've hole punched and hung our reports together. Kids wrote 5-paragraph essays. Each student might take a piece of it. We put them all together and we put them out in the hall and they score each other on a rubric. They're looking for the main ideas and the details and topic sentences. And they love doing that. So, but they're judging a team, not necessarily individuals, which is really great. So these are all of the things that we do with this fabulous idea of scaffolding. And last but not least, write a Halloween poem with it. You can list all the different characters in Halloween, ghosts, witches, goblins, whatever you want to list. Make a chart, what they do, noises they make. And then I write a poem in front of the students. We also read Halloween poetry. So we've identified in literature, I've modeled, and then check it out. The kids are going to choose which one they want to write about, write a strip, and then write their own poem. So they can get together with the other students who want to write about a cat or a ghost and write a beautiful poem together. Here's one of the wonderful poems that came out of that. I'm a witch as black as can be, boo. Do you like me? If you don't, I'll put you in my pot. Eek, 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 scary things. I told them we looked at how poetry always has repeating words. Here's a student that kind of took that all the way, too much repeating. Well, sanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So what's great about that's, of course, I think Einstein said that, didn't he? Well, try some guided writing in your classroom. Pick something from this workshop that you saw and try it. Here we have a student that wrote, "Dear parent, thank you for going to the zoo with us." And I had the kids just at the end of the field trip write a quick note in first grade. And then the student wrote love. So I said, write love so. And so they did. That isn't what I meant, walk this way. But really, guided writing is sort of a write this way. We are using a lot of scaffolding to help us with writing. So I am Lori Oczkus, and I'm going to stick around if people have some questions. I've run it right up to the end here, Carly, and I cut a lot out of this, but I
There's
just,
never too much to say.
I always feel that when one does a writing workshop, you have to have a lot of student samples to look to show people
Yeah.
that you can kind of envision what you might do in your own class. Somebody says here that they're going to be adding prompts to the hygiene kits we make for homeless individuals. I mean, there's all kinds of writing assignments you're already doing where you could incorporate elements of what I've shown you today. So that we do is bigger. Miss
Yeah.
Carly?
Well, am at a loss for words because, as always, it was wonderful. And thank you so much, everyone, no matter where you dialed in or called from, for joining us tonight. And of course, big thank you to you, Lori, for always sharing such joyful, practical strategies for our audience. So we will stick around for a few minutes if anyone has any questions, but if you don't, we will be posting the recording of this on our website. So please be on the lookout for a follow-up email that will include this, as well as a link to a certificate for completion and a link to Lori's handout that she created for you all. So definitely share these resources with colleagues. And if you go to rift.org/webinars, you can sign up for all of our wonderful upcoming webinars for this rest of the school year. And as always, feel free to reach out if you need anything. And thank you, Lori. As always, you are the best. And oh, and don't forget, everyone, Lori wrote a blog that will be accompanying this webinar that will also be coming out and has lots of other wonderful insights in there. So thanks as always, Lori, and I'm sure we'll be in touch very, very soon.
Yes, and please don't hesitate to contact me if you have individual questions. You can email me or look me up, and I'm happy to talk to you or your staff about how to incorporate guided writing. And what I usually do is actually work with schools very closely with what you're already using, your reading materials, your writing materials. So we take this concept and we plug it into what you're doing in your building. Hopefully you saw enough today that you can do that, and I'd love to hear from some of you about how it goes.
So, well, thank you for always willing to share with our community. We appreciate it. And like I said, we will chat soon, I'm sure. So thank you all, everyone. Have a great afternoon, evening, and reach out if you need anything.
Thank you.
Bye.